And I stand here alone with my head in my hands. I've been gone so long, I can't remember where I've been. I'm thinking about back at home, my family and friends, my brothers don't know that I'm there till the end. It's one thing that we all know. It's one thing we all know. No man's left behind. You'll see me once, you'll see me twice. I fight alongside my brothers. There's no man is left behind.
How do you cope? What helps you cope with your symptoms day to day?
I think the two things that have helped most are becoming self-aware of not getting drawn into the fear that it's real. So I have to constantly be questioning the fear. Is it really something from the past that's triggering me that is still, seems real, or is it in the present moment, am I really safe? And so cognitive awareness is really important. And then yoga has been a huge help.
How has yoga helped you?
Well, I was a yoga teacher before the PTSD was really bad, and it wasn't really about the nervous system, the type of yoga I was practicing. But then once I went through this, I actually took a course, Yoga for PTSD, which ironically was to help the military at the time, not really realizing I had it. So I'm sitting in this class thinking, okay, got my notes out, how can I help these soldiers? And I'm watching this, I'm saying, oh crap, this is me, I freaking have this. And the people in the class, there were therapists and people from all walks of life, other yoga therapists also helping different military posts around the country. And they were already aware, like, oh yeah, I have PTSD. I'm like, I'm just realizing this right now. So then I learned this different type of practice that's yoga therapy. It's not about physicality and all this. It's really about learning how to feel safe in your body and learning how to switch off the sympathetic fight or flight response. Now this was gigantic, and it really changed my life because I realized that my nervous system had been rewired now with PTSD, and so everything was like this for me. It was just constant, and that's what was making the flashbacks worse. It was all interconnected. So I got really into that study, and that's those two things, the cognitive awareness and the nervous system, and then dietary changes, all of this helped a lot.
Have you ever exploded in anger at work, at family, or friends?
Yeah, I felt really bad because I was known as kind of the peaceful yogi person, living in LA in that whole eating kale and being obnoxious, you know what I mean? And then, I lost my home in this situation from a house fire, so triggered it, and I was homeless like overnight. So there's a lot of I was dealing with. So I ended up down south. So I went from this, LA kale eating world to Fort Bragg, hardcore military, so it was a culture shock, and at this time I didn't realize what was happening, and I have, my temper is usually slow to burn. So I was with my best friend who was in the Army, and I've known her since high school, 20 years, and I remember her saying something to me, and I could feel the heat. It was 0 to 60, and I kind of exploded. And she was really taken aback because she's like, who is this person? It wasn't me. And I felt like I literally could not control the anger. And the anger went into a rage that was so bad that I felt like I could punch walls. The anger was off the charts. It was tough. And then another time, usually I like nature, and I went out for a bike ride in, North Carolina. I was on the military post, which is all stark, there's not a color in sight. And then it was all these freaking pine trees, rows and rows. So I'm trying to enjoy the bike ride, and I just like had this breakdown and started saying, F you trees, F you Fort Bragg, F you. Oh my gosh, like, and I was like, who am I? I don't talk, I don't do this. But I just was like losing it, like everything was irritating me. I had no peace anywhere. It was like a lot of anger.
Do you have any insomnia or sleep issues? And is it always the same kind of dream?
Now that I've had, yeah, since that was an earlier PTSD with childhood. So I've had that issue on and off. But with particularly this fire, because this was really, I think, the worst trauma for me. I had reoccurring nightmares of being back there, and it was frightening. And then what happens is, you know, you get so scared to go to sleep that creates an insomnia because you're scared to dream. So I had that issue for quite a while, and I would try everything, listening to meditation CDs, taking a bath, and what wanted to come up came up. So that was difficult to deal with. But again, I would wake up in a panic, thinking I'm there again, getting disoriented, and then having to like be in the present moment again. And I would literally say things to myself like I'm in my bed, you know, touch my body, because I'd be so out of my body, like disassociated. So it took a while, but I worked with an energy healer for that actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and as I was telling her, these nightmares are killing me. I'm not getting rest, it's making it worse. You can't have caffeine because caffeine will really string you out. So then how do you get through the day, you know? 2 hours sleep and constantly reliving it. And then she was working with energy, and it was amazing, but that's what helped me, stop it.
Do you have any flashbacks? And does that incident repeat?
I did in the beginning, and again, I wasn't, cognitively aware yet, so I didn't really know what was happening, but I remember the smell of smoke. Any smell of smoke would get me, and then I would start thinking I heard it and smelling it when it didn't exist. And so there's one time I was in the shower, and I seriously smelled smoke, and I was convinced that the place was on fire. And I ran out naked, searching the whole apartment, like heart beating, the whole thing, and there wasn't even a candle lit, nothing. The stove was fine, and that's when I was like, I'm losing my mind. Like, I'm thinking it's happening, I'm thinking I'm smelling things. In the car, we drive in the car, and there's all sorts of fumes out there when you're on the road, but I would smell it and become convinced my car was just going to explode. I kept visualizing explosions, because that's what I had seen in the PTSD, was there was a fireball that came seriously like here. I mean, I'm lucky it didn't burn my face off. So after seeing that, what does the brain do? It's like all of a sudden anything that's electrical might have that explosion again. So that was really difficult.
Do you ever get emotionally numb? Not that you stop caring at all, it's just that you don't feel anything anymore.
Yeah, that was for me, phase 1 was that, and then phase 2 was rage, and then phase 3 was back to numbness. So phase 1, I was, it was just full on shock. I was completely numb. I was in a state of mind where someone could have said, hey, let's move to the desert and, live in a tent for the next year. I'd be like, okay, like, sure, whatever you want to. It was really bad. And then what happened for me is it was an electrical fire that happened. And I'd been complaining about this old washer dryer that the landlord was supposed to replace in this rental I had. And she never replaced it. She had some guy off the street who looked very sketchy, barely spoke English, come in there and say it's fine. It wasn't fine. It was clanging. She was supposed to replace it. It was in the lease. She never replaces it, and then in the middle of the night, it combusted. It was an electrical wire, and and that's what happened. I woke up at it was a week before Christmas, about 1 o'clock in the morning. I was asleep. I was supposed to teach yoga the next morning, and the fire alarm went off, and I thought it was my alarm going off already. I thought, gosh, I was all disoriented, like it's not morning yet. Then I started to smell smoke. I saw it up on the ceiling, and then where the washer dryer was, it was about maybe 12 feet from my bed, and there were 2 doors to get there. There was a bathroom. So I opened the first door. It was really hot. The handle was hot. I noticed there was singed on my shower curtain, and then I opened the second door, and that's when the fireball. And literally everything was popping, my baskets, towels, this is a laundry area, and then the flame had spread. It was going to the kitchen. So imagine you're asleep, and then all of a sudden you wake up to this. I just couldn't process it. And so when that, I forgot your original question now, which happens with this. because you get lost in the story.
Yeah, exactly. Emotionally numb.
Emotionally numb. So when that all happened, I remember I was trying to dial 911 and I kept missing it. I was just, because you hear this question, if you had a fire, what would you take? I'm actually living it now, and I'm like, honestly, the only thing I thought of taking was my dog. That's it. And everything else, laptop, whatever, didn't even think about it. So I grabbed my dog, I'm trying to dial 911, I can't, it's like a movie, everything's moving in slow motion, I can't, it's like my brain's saying dial it, but my body isn't working. I finally get it, and I remember just saying, when are they going to get here? When are they going to get here? And I'm standing outside, and there's literally fire coming out the windows. I mean, it was a little bungalow, and the thing, I'm like watching my whole life just, and then the whole street was shut down, and all these fire trucks were there, like lined. It was very dramatic, and then all the guys come in heroically and do their job. But I remember just being like, as I'm watching this, there was no emotion. It was like it was happening to someone else. It was a movie. Neighbors came out. They were watching it as if it was entertainment. No one offered me a cup of water or a pat on the back or anything. Some of the firefighters were kind, but I just wasn't home. It was like, I just remember the fire chief saying, if you slept a few minutes longer, you wouldn't be here because of the carbon monoxide. And it was a tiny one-bedroom bungalow. It was spreading so fast. So he said, you're very blessed. And then Red Cross came and they kind of took over because I just wasn't there. That's all I can say.
Give an example of your hypervigilance.
Well, you can imagine all things with appliances. Any little, bump, and I don't care if it's the washer, dryer, the stove, anything. I'm hyper vigilant. I will call a service guy, have him come over 3 times if I need him to, make sure everything's fine. Make sure things are turned off. If I light a candle, I stopped actually having a lot of candles lit. Now I get the burners that you just, right? It's just this extra air of caution. With my car too, I smell anything, I take it right in. And I don't care because I'd rather be wrong and feel safe.
Exactly.
And that's just how I live. Like, why live with anxiety when you can just make sure it's okay?
So hypervigilance for you has really been incorporated into your life as something that helps keep you safe.
That's been a positive of
Yeah.
it. It's like being super responsible in that way. Very, very aware of my environment. And you have to draw the line between not having it torture you, where you're imagining things are on fire, and just being, cautious and saying, I want to take care of my stuff, make sure I'm not at risk again.
Right. Are you easily startled by loud noises or somebody slapping your back or tapping you on the shoulder?
Yeah, that's always been, and that goes back to an earlier childhood PTSD. But then what I find with PTSD is when you have any trauma that causes shock or that you start to check out, it kind of builds on it, So that started young, and then that still is with me. I don't like that. I don't know you're there, and I'm always going to be the jumpy, And I had, my ex-husband used to say, what's wrong with you? It's just me. There's no one else that's in the house. I don't care. It's my nervous system. You don't get it. My nervous system is raw. Make your entrance. Come where I can see you.
Do you have any negative thoughts? And about what?
The one thought that still bothers me, I'm still working on, is the idea that I'm not safe. And I worked hard when I was younger. I had a serious disease that almost killed me, and that was traumatic as well. And I had to work hard at telling myself life can be safe. I am safe. Yeah, and it takes a while to convince yourself of that. And I was able to actually do it, and then this beautiful cascade of events happened where, I had a healing practice, I was doing well, I was healthy, I felt good, and I did walk through the world, not, Pollyanna, like there aren't bad guys out there, but not feeling like something tragic's going to happen again. And what sucks about when PTSD happens again, it's like, here we go, okay, now I've got to convince myself again that, life is safe, and that's very challenging.
It is,
So
and it can be.
Yeah, affirmations and kind of finding that balance between, yes, bad things happen here, but it doesn't mean because something really bad happened to you that it's going to happen again, that your future is going to be filled with death and destruction. It doesn't have to be that way. Those negative thoughts are infectious because it will start one place And then it will take you to places where you start imagining the worst case scenario of everything. I mean, it could be everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose my job, I'm going to get sick, I'm not going to have a home, I'm going to end up on the street. Like, you can go to places that, what are you doing? Like, why are we using our time this way?
Exactly.
When in the here and now, we're fine.
Right.
It's madness.
It is, and it continues.
It does.
It's a spiral that it's just as much a spiral as you can go up, you can go down.
Right.
You know, I wish more people would figure out how to help themselves up or help others up.
It takes, I think, real strength. And this is what I told the soldiers in my class who would come in kind of embarrassed, like they're weak. It takes way more strength to actually confront it, work on changing the wiring in your brain through these positive thoughts, you know, paying attention to your body, than just losing yourself in a bottle. I mean, that to me is easier, you know? This is the hard work, but look how fulfilling it is, because you actually stop having something control you.
Right.
And PTSD is very controlling, and it's like that battle of, I'm not going to give you power today. Or alcohol or pills or whatever, like, I'm not giving any of you power to control me.
Right. Do you ever feel hopeless or guilty, and how does this affect your daily life?
I did in the beginning, because my personality was to blame myself from a young age. So when I was abused, I blamed myself. And then when you're around certain people that, you know, people say some stupid stuff when you go through trauma, really insensitive, outrageous, but they don't know what to say. In which case I'd say don't say anything at all, you know? And that kind of, when people give you this ridiculous feedback, it validates how you're feeling it's my fault, because other people are kind of insinuating it's your fault or just blatantly saying it's your fault. So that, if you're that kind of person that blames yourself, then you live with a lot of guilt, thinking, what if I did something differently? I shouldn't have done this. And then that's another way your brain can torture you for hours of, you know, going back to when you're 5, I shouldn't have made that decision. And that's why I think, for me, the faith that everything happens for a reason and that there is a bigger plan is the remedy for me for that.
Yeah.
Because I do see synchronicity in my life, and I can't say, well, there's synchronicity there when good things happen. There's not synchronicity when bad things happen, because that hasn't been true for me. There's synchronicity with both.
Right.
So.
Ever engage in self-destructive behavior, and can you give an example of how you might have gambled on the future?
That was more when I was younger, because thankfully when this PTSD happened with the fire, I had already been on this healing path for 10 years, working professionally as a Reiki therapist and teaching yoga and all this stuff and spiritual counseling. So I had a foundation to kind of buffer me, and I had tools. When I had PTSD when I was younger, I didn't have any tools. So I remember, like, you know, driving really fast, like very irresponsible, with the idea that I don't care if I get into an accident. Like, just kind of my anger coming out in the car. It was more how I treated myself, constantly berating myself, hard on myself. Nothing's ever good enough. Always trying to get the higher grade. But, you know, it was just never enough.
Right.
And that's how my self-destruction came out. What I said to myself, and not ever being good enough for myself.
Wow. How do your symptoms affect those around you? Family, friends, relationships, co-workers?
I think the toughest part in the beginning was I isolated myself, because for me, these different PTSDs I've gone through, one from childhood abuse, one was a statutory rape, and then this. These are the 3 main traumas I've had. All of these experiences, unless someone has been through it, I feel like they can't relate. So you go through a really dysfunctional childhood that you're like, you know, my friends' homes aren't like this. You feel different, you feel weird, you feel wrong, bad, ashamed, all this negativity. So you isolate yourself. Statutory rape, same thing. And that's very heated, because, you know, they blame the victim and this, and it gets, you didn't want to talk about it. I don't want to be a victim, I'm going to move on. So you isolate yourself there. And then for me with the fire, I had this whole healing community. But I felt so ashamed that I was now unhealed again myself in such a huge way. Not that I thought I was ever some guru or something, but I had, you know, I was a role model for people, and all of a sudden I couldn't even help myself. And it was a very depressing feeling, like, I just got, you know, swept under. Like, and because, like you, I like to help people, and not having that, I was like floundering for a while. So I did isolate myself from my healing community, which was it's not a good thing to do, but I do feel like it's important for the process, because sometimes with drawing, if you don't stay there long, but you stay there long enough to kind of get into a cocoon and nurture yourself and use it positively, focus on you. Don't worry about other people. Like, get your healers, get your therapists. Like, you know, you kind of, especially those of us that like to give to other people, this is an opportunity to give to yourself and really not feel, selfish about it. Because that's what is going to get you out of it, I mean, that's what worked for me, at least.
What do you personally think will help solve most of the issues around PTSD?
I think the number one thing that I've seen between myself and then working with the soldiers was that we don't understand our bodies. And so PTSD becomes a psych issue, and then that comes with a certain stigma. There's something wrong with you. You have a diagnosis, you're mentally ill, and then this sort of thing. And then that I feel like there's resistance around that because people don't want to identify with that. But they're not understanding that anything that happens in the mind is technically like a medical, physiological issue. You don't separate the mind from the rest of the body. It's a brain. It's not like the mind's out there somewhere and it's like some alien is affecting us. This is like, so what I found helped the soldiers and helped me is I would actually bring in anatomy and physiology books, and I would open them up and say, this is your nervous system. And this is your limbic brain, and this is what's happening. To understand the reptilian brain of survival and really kind of ground it through science. And I found that combined with some spiritual support, positive thinking, really helped bring this home. Instead of just thinking it's something I don't understand, it's mental, it's, So I think learning about physiology and what's happening in the body is extremely important to starting to know how to help yourself. Because there's chemical responses going on that have to be taken care of. That's why the anti-anxiety pills work.
Yeah.
It's not magic.
Right.
They're working on the parasympathetic nervous system, but the same thing that like a Klonopin or Xanax can do, so can restorative yoga. And that's what the veterans I've worked with, like the Vietnam guys, one of them said to me, your class has done more for me than any drug the VA ever gave me. And he was in his 70s, and he had been, PTSD'd out, had cancer, had a lot of chronic pain, shrapnel wounds. And I was amazed. It had nothing to do with me as a teacher. It had to do with the practice. It just shows that you can fix this or heal this another way without using pharmaceuticals, Again, not that I'm against them, because you got to use them when it's really hard.
When you need it,
PTSD.
sure, understandable.
You're not going to ohm your way out of, you know what I mean?
What is the intensity of your symptoms, the biggest, most difficult thing that you have to deal with?
I think the main thing is fear. I'm still kind of working on healing that fear. And I'm not putting a time limit on it either, because that's part of that perfectionist thing, is I have to have this healed, and that's kind of a ridiculous way to live, because we're meant to heal stuff here. We come here, we have homework, challenges, and we're not here just to like have fun, unfortunately. Like there's work to do. Yeah. So I see this as my work, and I don't identify as victim anymore. It's just like I'm a strong person, resilient. I've learned a lot from this experience, and this fear is continually teaching me new things about myself and also how to help other people dealing with it. And it's not about perfection. It's just all about learning.
You've really turned this into an advantage for yourself. I think that's awesome.
We have to, right?
Yeah. Well, what else are you going to do? Drown?
Well, that's what would happen.
Figuratively speaking.
Well, then you just give up.
Yeah.
Then it wins.
Yeah, and your mind takes over. It takes over your mind, if you will.
It's crazy to think that a story, because if you think of it outside of ourselves, it's a story that happened, and all of a sudden it stops. It becomes your whole reality forever. We can't do that to ourselves.
No, that's not life, and it's not acceptable.
No, it's not acceptable. It's like watching the same DVD your whole life. Like, anyone's going to go crazy if you watch the same freaking movie.
That's true. That's a great analogy, actually, yeah. What is your impression of the VA and how they've treated our soldiers, our troops?
Well, I've been working with veterans and military active duty veterans. My dad's a veteran. And my husband's a veteran, and he works for VA. So, what I see in the VA is there's not enough alternative options. It is very heavy on the drugs, and I don't see that there's a lot of guys who are taking advantage of the therapy. And it is hard to find a good therapist. Sometimes it takes a few times, but these guys can get discouraged if it doesn't happen right away, and then they just rely on the drugs without seeing anybody. And what's scary to me now is that the VA is now, I don't want to blame the VA because it's the veteran's responsibility to take care of himself, but they are enabling it to happen because we now have veterans that are driving who are on about 5 different painkillers, between narcotics and and Prozacs and Ambiens, and these are cocktails that can not only kill you if you mix it with alcohol, but you can also get into a car accident and hurt somebody because you're stoned. And what happens is that the dose has to keep going up and up because they're getting used to it now. And it's very sad to see we're creating, our veterans have gone through enough, and now we're creating drug addicts where they're yelling at doctors. They're finding ways to get drugs from different doctors when they're cut off. And now all of their rage that wasn't healed, it explodes and they can't get their drug. You know, veterans deserve better than this, and they have to require better of themselves to not get hooked into that path, because it's dark. It is a dark way to go, and you're going to keep being a victim your whole life if you get hooked on those narcotics. The VA has to have alternatives, acupuncture, you know, Reiki, whatever, yoga, Tai Chi. They should have all these things, aquatic therapy. You know, so the guys, they can say, well, if you want to take this drug, you can, but you can also do, here's 10 other things you can do. Art therapy, right? These things have been proven to work.
Yep.
The VA has to have a whole wing for this, in my opinion, so the guys can learn how these tools that I had as a healer. Every veteran, every person needs these tools to get through life because they don't know how to manage stress. Throw in PTSD. If you don't have stress management skills, you're done.
Do you have any message for anyone who's contemplating self-harm, suicide, these kinds of things because of PTSD?
What I understand, this has nothing to do with religion, it's purely intuition of the work I do, is that if we kill ourselves, God doesn't punish us, go to hell and all this, but the problem is you can't escape your conscious mind, because that's what carries over when we're not in the physical body. So if we're in a really dark place and we get rid of the physical body, what's left? The dark place. We create our own hell then, because then we're kind of locked in this consciousness. We're not seeing the light over there because we didn't see the light here. That's why for me, it's not an answer. You can't escape it, you've got to confront it. It's the only way. And even if you don't believe that, then I just also feel like, don't give up. Don't give up on the game. Even at one of those days when it's hard and you feel like it'd be easier just to not be here, there's always something you can find. Someone who loves you, something beautiful in the world, like a glimmer of hope, something, you know, just to not let go. Because I think if we don't have compassion for ourselves and we're just constantly berating ourselves, then life here is going to be hell. And life can be peaceful if we can just be more gentle with ourselves. And I wouldn't even, don't say, okay, we're not going to love ourselves in a minute, but at least start to like yourself. Start to focus on the good that you have. Stop thinking of all the stuff you don't have. You know, it's just not worth it.